No. Up as we have right now, so just bear with us. Good morning. How are you? I'd like to give a quick shout out to a couple of people out there. Just bear with me. Let me get back to my notes. Lois, stand by. You could hear me, I'm sure, hopefully. Nod of the head. I see that. That's great. I'm going to shout out to a couple of people from Canada. First of all, Paul Rogers, Adele Campbell, great artist out there. Cody McGregor, all right. Cody McGriff, I'm sorry, out in Oregon. Sue out in Oregon. Laura Cobb, Chicago. Sayedi out in Iran. All these people are dropping in. Thank you. Ben in Miami. And Rob in Washington State. And my good friend Peter Heyman, who's going to be a surprise add to the stream right now. Hi, Peter. Guess what? You're on.
Hey,
okay?
Paul. How you doing?
Hi. I wanted to surprise somebody. That's why we got you on the screen. Peter Heyman has a little bit of a relationship with this next lady coming on. So let's get her on. Let's add her to the stream. Isn't this amazing? Say goodbye, Pete. Goodbye, Pete.
Bye, Pete.
Okay. Wanted to start out with a little bit of a laugh. That's an inside joke for everybody here. But once again, I'd like to welcome our esteemed guest, Lois Cam Heyman. And we are going to call her Lois. No doubt about that. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul, and thank you for having me today.
You are so welcome. You are out in a place called Nyack, New York. We're going to go right there, and we're going to welcome you into the screen here, first of all. And you are from, where's Nyack in New York for all the people around the world? We have comments coming in already, by the way.
Okay, well, Nyack, New York is north of New York City, about 40 minutes north of New York City. And it's
Okay.
it's a river town next to the Hudson River.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we have you all the way coming from New York, and we have done a lot of advertising in terms of who we have for this guest. She's appeared on Good Morning America, had been published in the New York Times. She's an esteemed speech, help me, language pathologist.
Correct.
Lois, I'm going to slow down for a minute and I'm going to get out of the screen. I want you to tell me what a speech language pathologist does. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So a speech language pathologist is a professional that works with children and or adults in communication and improving communication skills for these individuals. So a speech language pathologist can work with children with language disorders, adults that have aphasia as a result of stroke, stuttering, voice, there's articulation, but my area of expertise is auditory learning and auditory processing and language processing. So I work with children who have difficulties receiving the auditory message, whether they have hearing loss, or they have auditory processing disorder, or
Okay.
they're listeners that affects their language.
How does this, in terms of, now I'm going to throw you another question. You and I have talked several times, and we go way back as well through relationship with Peter, who is your husband, and a great coach. We've had him on the show a few weeks back, Coach Pete. You had told me a very, very interesting story. The story is this. How did you get into this field? What motivated you? I mean, did you wake up in the morning and say, you know what? Guess what? I'm going to be a speech language pathologist, and I'm going to help children, and I'm going to do all kinds of things for them to make their life easy and their life for their parents and teachers and so forth. Tell me a little bit about what possessed you to get into this field.
Well, it's a wonderful story because it was, listening. It has to do with listening. So when I was in high school, Fair Lawn High School, and Paul and I went to Fair Lawn High School together.
There you go.
I had a teacher by the name of Mrs. Carlo. She was also known as Miss Jackson. She was my drama and English teacher. And I was 16 years old, and she came over to me and said, Miss Cam, I think you should go to Emerson College and be in speech. It was sort of like, oh, okay. And I was very impressionable because she was my favorite teacher. And I went home, told my mother, I'm going to Emerson College and going into speech. And my mother said, what do you mean speech? And I said, I don't know. And she said, speech therapy? I said, oh, what's that? And she took me over to meet a speech therapist who worked with deaf and hard of hearing children. This was in the 1970s. And I said, I want to do this. So I went to Emerson College. They had people working with deaf and hard of hearing children. And from there, it was just a straight line to what I wanted to do. I've been in the field for over 40 years. It's always different, but it all starts with that teacher saying to me, you'd be good at this. One thing I want to add to that, 30 years later, I found that teacher. And we got very close in her later years. And she did not remember the comment at all. And she said, I probably meant oral interpretation because that's what she did and drama. And where I took it off on another way and I became exactly what I was supposed to be.
There you go. So in terms of working in your field, you work in that field for so long, obviously, for over 30 years. In that March, and I'm going to slow down a little bit, we do have a relationship going back to Bergen County and Fair Lawn High School, etc. I get that, but there was a relationship that you made with an Emmy Award winning actress. And I have to tell you, I want you to expound on this a little bit because I'm going to ask you, how did that relationship first come about? And then I want you to get into a little bit about your book, because you're an esteemed author as well on this subject. And tell me a little bit about the story of your book, or how did you meet an actress by the name of Rosie O'Donnell?
Okay, well, everything's a story, right? I wasn't a fan of Rosie O'Donnell. I didn't watch her show, but my children went to a Green Meadow Waldorf school in New York, not far from where I live now. And years after they graduated, they were still referring kids to me, and they referred Blake O'Donnell to me, Rosie O'Donnell's son. And I started working with him with young children. I worked with the parent in the room, and Rosie was not on Good Morning America at that point. It was between her two stints. So she was the parent in the room. And that was quite a challenge, keeping her quiet, but keeping her supportive. Of course, she was of her son. She has 5 children. And she worked with me twice a week, every day for years. But in the first 6 months, she said to me, I don't understand this, Lois. My son's getting better, and you come in here with your little toys, and it just seems so retro, she said to me, but it's working.
Right.
And yes, it is. It's my method. And she said, well, how do we share this with the world? And I said, I don't know. And she said, you're going to write a book. And I said,
Well,
oh,
slow down for a second.
yes.
Let me revert back.
Okay.
How long were you working with Rosie before the epiphany came about to her to come to you and say, you know, my children, whatever you're doing is getting better?
Mhm.
And how long did that take between the relationship between you and her before she came up and said, you know, I think you should write about this? Tell me a little bit about that, because, you know, this lady was very famous. She, you know, she's had her ups and downs, we know.
For
Okay.
sure. Yes.
Very, very controversial. But then again, what was the mindset there when she came to you and approached you and said, you know, you need to write about this? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure.
How long?
Rosie's a very generous person and very generous when she believes in something. She saw her son change over the first 6 months. We talked a lot about those changes and how they were coming about. And one of the things Rosie is well known for is when she believes in something, she tries to spread the word. And she said, I want other parents that don't know anything about this to know about this. And because their child can be helped, this is not something they can live with for their whole life, auditory processing disorder. And he had been diagnosed by an audiologist, that's how it goes, but I was doing the intervention. And within 6 months, she says, I can't believe the changes.
Wow.
And we had a long way to go, but over the next, I would say next 3 months, she kept talking about, let's get this out, let's get this out. I said, I'm not an author. I don't know how to. She goes, you're going to write the book. Don't worry about it. I'll write the introduction. And in the end, which she did, in the end, she also wrote sidebars to everything I talked about with the general population. She wrote about how it affected her son in the therapy that we did. And then it was written about in the New York Times as a way of getting people to know about auditory processing disorder. So what Rosie did for me was she handed me this opportunity to get the word out about the work and my work. And as a result of that, my whole practice changed. I still have a private practice, but I got to lecture around the world. I had people in for evaluations from India, from Dubai, from Puerto Rico, and as a result, I trained therapists in those countries to work with children with auditory processing disorder. So she opened the door for me, but yet the method was established and continues to evolve.
Wow, that's incredible. We have a question from Dr. Laura Cobb. She is a psychologist. She's an avid listener of our show. And actually in a few weeks, she's going to be jumping on with us as well from Chicago. Here's her question. And I know this is kind of, right off the cuff, we're on live. So here we go. Let's read this. How can parents best strengthen their less able child, tween, towards self-empowerment, especially in this pandemic, in which audio may be needed at home for virtual learning? So how can we strengthen that from a communication standpoint? I know this is a question. You didn't see this. It was a comment that just came in. And
I talk about this all the time, and I have a program called Teacher Talks, where I discuss all of these ways of improving children's listening for teachers and for parents, and also what we do virtually to strengthen it. So that could be found on my website. It's called Teacher Talks, and it's a 2.5-hour audio, visual and audio program. But besides that, in real time, what we have to realize is that now children are being forced to learn virtually, and it's very tiring, and it's a very different kind of method for them.
Absolutely.
What they're really craving and what they're really lacking is that one-on-one time, or one-on-three time with a live adult who's going to be talking to them. And I'm not saying that parents should turn into teachers. I think that's unfortunate that we're making that happen, because the boundaries get blurred. But what we really need to be doing is spending time with our children in real time, talking and laughing, playing board games, reading together, doing things, painting, drawing, anything we can do to strengthen that bond of listening and language with
Right.
live voice and live emotion and live facial expressions. This is what we're all craving. And the pandemic has forced us into this very strange, virtual, and isolated place. And communication, live communication, is needed more than ever, with emotion and with directness. And so parents need to really spend that quality time, not talking about homework, not talking about the things they're doing virtually, but just life in general, storytelling, games. This, we're all craving it, and children must have it.
Okay. And I thank Laura Cobbin. Lois, thank you for that explanation. At the end of the show, when we do communications and how they can contact you, let's mention that as well. It's on your web. Coach Pete has chimed in and on a private chat to me, as always, and that's really a good thing. And what he wants to do is, he's so proud of you. You know that, obviously. We're going to go, I'm going to split the screen a little bit between you and I. Hopefully we could do this. And tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so that's
what we were talking about.
That's the book we were talking about, The Sound of Hope, Recognizing, Coping, and Treating Your Child's Auditory Processing Disorder. And you see that the foreword's by Rosie. But what the book is I was trying to reach children, parents of children, and teachers of children under the age of 8. And this would be before diagnosis of a disorder. But when they're seeing different things from their children, the child can't follow step directions. The child says, huh, and what, many times a day. Often we think it's attention deficit disorder, but it's really very often these listening challenges. And why do children have listening challenges so much more now than before is the invention of technology. And more virtual, but when children were just on their devices all day, every day, what they weren't getting was that ability of reciprocity, listening and speaking, listening and speaking. And that reciprocity, we don't build our listening skills. And so children nowadays have poorer listening skills as a result of the lack of input or live input. And so that's why we have these difficulties with many children, even if they're not diagnosed with an auditory processing disorder.
Right.
So the book is really explaining that. And then the second half of the book are exercises and fun games and the ways to read to a child under the age of 8 that encourages listening and language development.
Okay. So let me turn around for a second. I'm going to take my headphones off for a minute. Keep them entertained for a minute, Lois.
Okay. Should I sing? I don't know where he's going and what he's doing.
Can we see this? There it is.
Okay, there it is.
Okay. Great book. The other one as well, I'm gonna get Peter in as well because he's such a good guy. Get out of your way and get with it. Coach Pete, can you see that? Okay, good. He's smiling. All right, what a team. That's all I got to tell you. Talk about helping people and talk about reaching out to people. And like the theme of the show is now from DBS, what you may see can change your life. Lois is an example of that and what she does. I'm going to get into a couple of other things as well. With Lois, we talked about children, but she has an organization that she works with, and I'm going to really let her go on this because she is extremely passionate about this. In our pre-production chats that we went through this week, and we finally came about through some technical problems over the week. she had mentioned her work as a consultant, and I hope I get this right, with the Worldwide Orphans, which is extremely interesting. And I would like for you to share that with people. And before I do that, though, I need the definition of the auditory processing disorder. Give me the definition of that, or let me see what it is, if you can, or, tell me. Tell me, that way parents, teachers, doctors, etc., mentors would know what's happening. Go ahead.
Okay, so auditory processing disorder is not hearing loss. So the child hears perfectly normally, but when the sound leaves the ear and goes to the brain, the information gets transferred through auditory pathways. In those pathways, there can be delay or dysfunction. And that means that what reaches the child's brain is not exactly what was said. And that
Mhm.
is a simple thing like, or seemingly simple thing like discrimination. So if the teacher said, and then the girl went to bed, but our child thinks they've heard, and then the girl went to dead, the
Ooh.
are acoustically very similar. So if they mishear that, they know that's wrong because that doesn't make sense. They're very smart, but they say, oh, it must be bed because the teacher's talking about pajamas and nighttime, and oh, it's bed. But what's happening for the child while they're making that repair is that the teacher keeps on talking. And now they've missed 2 or 3 words. So now they're lost. And so this slight mishearing, which is part of the auditory processing disorder, will then affect their language, their understanding, their comprehension. And what do kids do when they don't understand?
Mhm.
You have 3 choices, basically. Usually it involves anxiety. It creates anxiety. And then they may withdraw and jump out the window, or they may act out. And then it looks like behavior. In all those cases, we very often think, oh, they have attention deficit disorder. But actually it started with an auditory discrimination problem. And so I'm not saying children don't have ADD and ADHD, but I am saying that auditory difficulties will look like a child that might not be paying attention. I think a lot of adults are probably shaking their head, oh, I experienced that. Or we have a lot of unresolved auditory difficulties that turn into personality types.
Ah, there you
right?
go.
Because when we don't hear really well, or we're not quite sure what's said, what do we tend to do? Take the stage and talk, and not take time to listen.
Absolutely.
And our society has really changed into a society of talkers. I want to get my point across. I want to say what I have to say. And we're not listening, doing active listening. And, we're really supposed to be listening to the other person, not thinking of what we're going to say next. So listening skills are so important in our world. And we've got kids that can be helped and adults that could learn to modify their behavior a little bit once they understand.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know, just non-listening going on nowadays. Another question came in. Let me see if I can get this from Laura again. I don't know whether this is in your wheelhouse, but we'll put it up anyway. Yes, it impacts, in other words, the listening skills impacts the relationship throughout their lives, making an assumption about what somebody has said, which was never said. Communications problems exist throughout life. And that is a wow. That is something that I think as we go through life, if we could button this more and listen there, I think we'd all be better off. That's for sure. I want to go into one other thing with you, if I might, as I mentioned, and just let me get production to get that up on the screen for us, because this seems to be near and dear to your heart. And you have a very special passion about something which we just mentioned, let alone the book and let alone helping children within the United States. Tell me a little bit about, let me make sure I got it right again, the Worldwide Orphans. When you expressed that to me yesterday, you lit up like a light bulb. Tell me a little bit about that. Go ahead.
So about 5 years ago, I joined an organization as a consultant called Worldwide Orphans, and Worldwide Orphans has been around for 20 years, and it was led by Dr. Jane Aronson, and now it's led by the CEO of it is Claudia Fleming. And what we basically do is we work with children around the world that are in desperate situations because of poverty and lack of food and lack of education, but mostly because of trauma. And trauma takes very different ways. It could be food, it could be insecurity of place to live, it could be abuse in the family. There's a huge list of that trauma, what trauma is like for little children.
Right.
And what's most important about that, besides being dangerous, it's that the child will miss their developmental milestones, that it interrupts being able to grow and be able to learn.
Wow.
And so Worldwide Orphans develops programs through play that teach children ways to listen, learn language, relate to a book, but through play with specified toys. And it's called prescriptive play. And for them, I develop the programs and I train the individuals in Ethiopia, Vietnam, Bulgaria, and Haiti. So we have toy libraries, which they're called our Element of Play learning spaces, and where those prescribed toys are with the programs that I've written, and train the individuals in their language, because when I used to travel with a translator, and through that we work with the children to make sure that they develop five domains. One is social emotional, cognitive, fine motor, gross motor, and communication. And the playing of the toy in this way helps them get those skills that they may not have gotten, or definitely haven't gotten, at home and at school. And in many places, we have these spaces or we have preschools where we're teaching the adults who may have been traumatized themselves, but working with the children in their care. And so we have learning spaces in Bulgaria, we have 17 and Vietnam, and I used to go in person. Now we do this virtually. I train virtually and write programs, but it is an amazing understanding of children that suffer trauma and what we can do to help them through play. Remember, these places don't have toys. They've never seen the toys. And one of the programs we wrote was for the pandemic was how to play at home without toys. So using stones and buckets of water. And so really trying to be innovative in a way that all parents and adults can play with children and help them learn through listening and language. And bringing these programs now to the US because we have a lot of trauma here also.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as we get on through, hopefully we turn the other side pretty quickly. But I think over the next few years, within 5 to 10 years, a lot of this on these young children is still going to be engraved, unfortunately. But that's why we need good people like yourself out there battling for them every single day, not only within the United States, but worldwide. You told me that yesterday, and I almost fell off the floor. It's an unbelievable special passion and compassion that you see for these children, and I thank you for that. Those of you that want to connect with this nice young lady, there's several ways, and you could go to www.listen, love, and learn. I love that. That makes me feel at peace right away. And she has a huge Facebook following. So those of you that use Facebook, get in touch with her that way. She also has some other programs. I'm just going to let her elaborate before we wrap up a little bit about those programs that you might see within her website that might help your child or somebody you know. If you want to go about that a little bit, Lois, tell me a little bit about what they would find on that website in terms of, those helpful instructions that you do. Go ahead.
So I've developed many programs besides for worldwide orphans, but here in this country. So speech and language therapists that want additional training in auditory and language intervention. I have programs for that, so listening challenges for children, and that's a course for CEUs. I also have Teacher Talks, which is a 2.5-hour webinar, and it talks with a manual that talks about how teachers can improve listening skills in children from preschool through high school, and it's helpful hints and things to remember. We had a very successful showing of it, and now it's on my website as a recorded webinar. I also have Sounds Fun, which is for pre-K and kindergarten students, and it's for teachers. It's listening, language, and pre-literacy, and it's through fun stories and games. That can be done virtually or it can be done in person. And that's with groups of children or individual children. And my new one that we're working on right now is Listen, Love, Play. And that's for parents to be playing with their children at home using the techniques that I use internationally, but with children here at home, and parents being able to find the right toys and the right ways, and I say right, but the best practice ways to play with their children to increase their listening and language.
That is beautiful. I always end with, we're coming to about 32 minutes into the broadcast, and I'm going to wake Pete up in a minute, and he's going to be on the screen because he's going to thank you for showing up. Yes, he is, whether he wants to or not. Tell me a little bit, if you can, for the worldwide audience, because we go worldwide here. What is the big takeaway for our audience in meeting with Lois today? The big takeaway. If you could kind of wrap something around this, make a bow, tie it, and outside of knowing that children are our future as well. Exactly. So go ahead, Lois.
Okay, so I think that helping children develop listening skills is one of the most valuable things we can do. And the way we do that is by being involved with the child. So it is being in person with that child, talking to that child, reading to that child, playing with the child. The more interaction our children have with adults that care and love them, and doing it in the most playful way, we are increasing their ability to socialize, to listen, to respond, and to be active learners. And I think there's nothing better than we can offer our children is our love and play and ability to learn.
Wow. I have to tell you, I've learned so much from you within the last week as well. And I'm sure this guy on the other end, as soon as we bring him in, is going to thank you for showing up today. Right, Coach Pete? You're going to thank your wife for saying hello to everybody?
You're muted. Peter,
He's muted. But you know what? That's even better. Coach Pete, thank you so much for showing up. I love you for that. And you know that we are close friends from way, way back. So I'm going to say goodbye to people, and I'm going to say hello to Lois one more time. Lois, I want to thank you for being with us today. Those of you that want to get in touch with Lois, as I said, she's in Nyack, New York. The best way to do it is on her website. Just let me see whether we could get somebody to put that up for us again. Hold on one second. We'll see whether we could do that. There we go. Thank you, production. Good guys. Always have my back. Best way to contact Lois, www.listenloveplaying.com. loveloveLearn.com. Facebook, she is big there, as I know. And I have to thank her for coming here today, spreading her knowledge around the world for the future of our world. These are the kids that are going to take over for us. We're going through a tough time now as well. And as we move on forward, it's people like Lois's that are going to help the future and are the future for our children. So I'd just like to thank you all for staying with us. This is one of our longest programs. Thank you so much for your patience. Okay. And let me see whether we could put that up. Lois, thank you so much for staying with us and sharing your time during the week and the frustration with our technology. For those of you that don't know, we have a practice dry run through the day before on Thursday, and all our technology crashed on Wednesday night. So we thank Lois for showing up. Thank you, Lois, once again from the bottom of my heart. I thank everybody in LinkedIn. Those of you that have done some, let me see, we have one more comment out here. Let's see what it is. Oh, it's all the way from, oh, that's great. Sue is out in Bend, I forgot already, Bend, Oregon. So all the way from the other side. Thank you so much, Sue. I appreciate it. You guys have been great. I thank you all for staying with us. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. I'm going to sign off. Lois, stay with me for a little after production stuff. Thank you. Have a good day. Enjoy your healthy Friday. Bye. Peace for everybody. Bye-bye.